Now that we have covered the regional terms and you kind of know about the names of different parts of the body, we now have to start talking about directional terms, which is sort of directions on the body. Normally, when I'm discussing this in class, I will solicit students to talk and to give examples of each of these different things. So I'll just give some for you as I discuss them. Okay, so we'll start with anterior and posterior because we discussed this in the last video. Anterior means nearer to or at the front of the body. Posterior means nearer to or at the back of the body. They're opposite terms from each other. So when we give examples of this, we could say something like, we want to talk about a structure of the body that is anterior to something else. So you could say something like the sternum, your breastbone, which kind of goes right down the center of your chest, is anterior to your spine. Your spine, your spinal column, your vertebral column is posterior to your sternum. And that's oftentimes how the language is conveyed. You say something is blah, blah, blah to something else. All right, here's another set of directional terms, opposites. Superior, toward the head or the upper part of a structure. Inferior means away from the head or the lower part of a structure. So you might say something like, let's look at some regional terms. Let's say the frontal region pertains to the forehead, is superior to the cervical region, which is the neck. And the cervical region is inferior to the frontal region. All right, these two terms here, medial and lateral, we cover them quite a lot. All 6 of these terms here I use all the time, so it behooves you to get to know them well. Medial means nearer to the midline, and lateral means further from the midline. So the midline of the body is basically a straight line that goes basically from your nose to your groin. It basically bisects your body into the left and right halves. So when we say something is medial, it means nearer to that stripe that bisects your your nose to groin. So for example, you could say, the heart actually rests right on the midline. So the heart would be medial to the lungs, which are on either side of the heart. And the lungs would be lateral to the heart. All right, the next term is called intermediate. The term intermediate means between two structures. It's not a term that I use very often. Ipsilateral and contralateral. Interestingly, we do use this term. I'm not sure how much time we're going to have to spend on the cerebrum, but I'm fairly sure we'll cover these two terms. Ipsilateral means on the same side of the body as another structure. Contralateral means on the opposite side of the body from another structure. So these terms are most likely to be used in brain anatomy. Just in my opinion, that's usually where I've heard them used, because what we have is contralateral control and contralateral sensation. So what that means is the right side of your brain, the right side of your cerebrum, controls the left side of your body, and it's the opposite. The left side of your cerebrum controls the right side of your body, and additionally, the left cerebrum receives information from the right side of the body. The right cerebrum receives information from the left side of the body. So this is a perfect example of contralateral. Ipsilateral, we actually hardly ever use this term. That concept of the brain being contralateral is so interesting. But yes, ipsilateral does mean on the same side. The next two terms, proximal and distal. Proximal and distal. Proximal means closer to the trunk or point of attachment. Distal means further from the trunk or point of attachment. And as far as the first semester of this class is concerned, the only time we're actually going to be using these terms is pertaining to the limbs, the legs and the arms. Be really careful with this one because it's very likely that you're going to be ending up with some exam questions where we have some stickers on, on a model on the arm, and one of them is on the palmar region, and one of them is on the antecubital region. You can look up what those ones are, by the way. Which of them would be proximal and which of them would be distal? Well, it depends on where you're comparing. They're comparing the two of them, and you're also looking at how close they are to the shoulder. The shoulder in this case would be the point of attachment to the trunk. So in this case, the antecubital region would be proximal to the palmar region because the proximal region is closer to the shoulder. You could also say, well, the palmar region is distal to the antecubital region. The palmar region is distal to the antecubital region. I want you to be careful of these ones because we always use the term proximal and distal when it pertains to the limbs. Because when we are in anatomical position, and I'll show you anatomical position when we're actually in the lab, but the idea of anatomical position is that your limbs are at a slight angle. They're slightly angled from your body. And therefore, it's not correct to use the words superior and inferior. That's not the most correct terminology here. Although students do make that mistake all the time. So I'm telling you right now, it's going to be on the test. Don't make the mistake. Don't do it. If there's a sticker on your antecubital and there's a sticker around the palmar and it says the palmar region is blank to the antecubital region, the best word to say is distal to. And then let's do a leg example too, just to make sure that you're understanding the concept. With the leg, the point of attachment is the coxal region, the hips where the legs attach to the trunk. And if we were to say, for example, the patellar region and the tarsal region, and you can look those up, remind yourself what those are. The patellar region would be proximal to the tarsal region. The tarsal region would be distal to the patellar region. So the patellar region, proximal to the tarsal region because the patellar region is closer to the attachment point. But the tarsal region is distal to the patellar region. And lastly, we have the terms superficial and deep. Superficial means something that is toward or on the surface of the body. Deep means away from the surface of the body, and away from the surface of the body and internal. I've had students point out that you could be talking about something that's flying up into space. It's going away from the surface of the body. Of course, we're talking about something that's actually penetrating the body. It's deeper down inside. So the most superficial structure on your body would be your skin. So you could say something like, well, your skin is superficial to your muscles. And your muscles are superficial to your bones. They tend to kind of wrap around each other. So when we talk about things that are superficial and deep, we're talking about things that wrap around other things. Now, when we take a look in the lab, when we meet in lab, I want you to take a look at an articulated skeleton and look at the rib cage. Oftentimes, students are under the impression that the ribs are only towards the front of the body or towards the anterior portion of the body. But in fact, they wrap all the way around and they actually articulate with, or they touch, the vertebral column in the back. They touch the spinal column. They touch the backbone. So the ribs actually wrap entirely around the soft tissues of your chest, your heart, and your lungs. So in this case, you would say the ribs are superficial to the lungs, and the lungs are deep to the ribs.